Inflation rose 9.1% in June, which was even more than expected due to consumer pressures intensifying. Hey guys, it's Mike here, and my goal, as many of you know, is to help you get your first or next rental. In this video, we're going to talk about the devastating effects that inflation is going to have on your ability to get your first or next rental. Now, most of the statistics that I'm going to share with you come directly from the CNBC article written by Jeff Cox. I'm going to put the link for that down in the description below. Let's jump right in. Now, the Consumer Price Index increased 9.1% from a year ago in June. That's above the 8.8% Dow Jones estimate. So for those of you hoping that the market had already priced this in, we're probably going to be disappointed. Now, excluding food and energy, core CPI rose 5.9% compared with a 5.7% estimate. Costs surged in gasoline, groceries, rent, and dental care. Now, adjusted for inflation, workers' hourly wages fell 1% during the month and are down 3.6% from a year ago. So unless you've gotten more than a 3.6% raise in the last 12 months, you are making less money today than you were last year at the exact same time. This marks the fastest pace for inflation going back to November of 1981. We're not setting the types of records that we should be. This is a 41-year high. Now, these numbers seem to counter the narrative that inflation may be peaking, as the gains were based across a variety of categories. Now, I'm sure just like me, most of you are seeing increased prices at the pump, increased costs at the grocery store, and increased service costs. I just had my brakes done on a Geo Storm that cost me $700. That's over half of what I paid for the car 11 years ago. Now, rental costs rose 0.8% in June. That's the largest monthly increase since April of 1986, according to the BLS. Now, this is a 0.8% increase for a single month, not the year-over-year statistic. It shows that rental prices, much to the dismay of already overpressured wannabe homeowners, are still continuing to climb. The inflation reading could push the Federal Reserve into an even more aggressive position, and that's where we're going to jump in with our analysis. Unfortunately for you, unfortunately for me, anybody who is looking to borrow money and borrow it at a rate that makes sense is going to be sorely disappointed. The Fed is going to have to continue to raise rates. It's the only tool that they have in their tool belt to combat this unbelievably hot inflation that we're seeing in the U.S. economy right now. And so I'm frustrated. I'm extremely frustrated, and I'm concerned for you, especially if you're the kind of person out there who's trying to get on the property ladder. That the first step, your first step onto the property ladder, which is your first property, that step is getting higher and higher and higher. And it's to the point where you're going to need a ladder just to get onto that first step. And it's very frustrating. Now, I want to talk for a second about income inequality. Now, I know that this is typically a very political buzzword, political argument type topic. You have one side that says, wow, we need to tax the rich to take their money to redistribute it and be more equitable. I don't think that it works. There's no evidence that it ever has, and usually it just leads to corruption, greed, or in worst case scenario, communism. But on the other side of the aisle says, oh, income inequality is completely good. There's nothing wrong with it. The rich people make all the jobs. And while that's mostly true, there are some serious things that do come with income inequality. Take it from me, a police officer. I see it directly in my day-to-day work. Income inequality leads to larger crime rates in the area where it exists. And let me explain why. Now, the theory I'm going to share with you is from a social scientist, a psychologist type, and he explains why where there is no income inequality in states like South Dakota, where most everyone is poor or closer on the same income economic spectrum, there's a lot less crime, there's lower crime rates. Whereas when you go to cities like New York or Chicago or Seattle or LA, where there is the ultra rich and the ultra poor living directly with and beside each other, what happens from a psychological perspective is that the poor people feel like they can't get a fair shake. Now, whether they're right or wrong about that is another argument, but that's how they feel, and that leads them to lash out and commit crimes and rob and steal and become violent. So left, right, or center, you absolutely should care about income inequality, because too much of it will destabilize the system that we're all participating in. That's not good for me. That's also not good for the individuals who are on the lower level of the income spectrum right now, who, like me, that's the background that I came from. I would like to see these individuals have a shot at actually being able to make it onto the property ladder and live the American dream, which is the rags to riches story. So when I see opportunities taken away or made or put further out of reach, it frustrates me, which leads me to the point of the video, which is to try to help you figure out how to get your first or next rental property. Now, as we're seeing these interest rates continue to rise, as prices on everything continue to go up, yes, even including housing still going up in prices in most places, like my market here, I want to encourage you now more than ever to do everything you can to try your best to get a piece of real estate. You need to accept that house hacking is the best way to get started. You're going to be able to go out there and find a property. There's going to be less competition for that property now than there was 6 months or a year ago. It's going to cost you more than it would have 6 months or a year ago. But that is where the power of house hacking, getting roommates or just getting a duplex like I have and putting a tenant in one side and living in the other, that is going to be how you mitigate the situation of an increased payment. Now you might be saying to yourself, well, I don't want to buy right now if prices are going to come down. That is a very fair argument. And anybody who tells you they know that the housing market is going to crash or isn't going to crash, they're lying to you either way. Nobody knows for sure. Now remember, most people define a crash in prices as a 20% decrease or more. Is it possible that the market corrects? Is it possible that prices come down? You might be looking at Realtor.com on a daily basis and saying to yourself, well, I see arrows coming down, the prices are dropping. Doesn't that mean that the market is changing? And I want you to take that with a grain of salt. What's happened over the last several years of prices increasing, and especially the last 2 years since the pandemic, is that people have been able to ask for the moon and then they get it, and everybody bids things up left and right, and it's insane. So when you see, oh, there was a decrease in price of 1%, 3%, something like that, look at it on a year-over-year basis. I'm willing to bet that if you look at it on a year-over-year basis, that price decrease is still more than what it was worth 1 year ago at the exact same time. So was there really a price decrease? Does it really look like the market's changing? Or is it just slowing down? Oh, they thought the price was going to continue to accelerate at the same rate it had been, and really it's accelerating slower, but still accelerating. And for those of you who are saying, well, it's a terrible time to buy a house because interest rates are high, you're right. But guess what? The rate right now is 6%. Well, what do we know is going to happen with inflation? A month from now, 2 months from now, those rates could be 7 or 8%. If you get in today, you're going to be so grateful that you locked in a lower interest rate. And if I'm wrong, guess what? Oh, interest rates fall. Can you really see them falling with inflation still increasing at more than it was months ago? But let's say I'm wrong. Interest rates come down. Refinance. You have an opportunity to refinance. The only exception, the only argument that you might have in this situation is, well, if interest rates increase so much, then prices will just have to come down, and then I'll jump in when the price is lower. And all I can say is I've been making videos here on YouTube for like 5 years about real estate, maybe 4 years. You can go back and watch all of my videos from before I ever earned a rental, before I had ever gotten any of these 4 cards from Michael Zuber in the last 4 years. I own 10 rental units. I own 8 total properties. I'm friends with people who have hundreds of units. I am a guest on multiple different YouTube channels. I read through thousands of comments on my videos on their videos. I then take those comments and interview some of these guys with them. One thing that I always see is I'm going to wait for prices to drop and then I'm going to get into the market. And that sounds great on paper, but it almost never works. Anyone who has said that over the last several years I've been making videos has missed opportunity after opportunity after opportunity. And people have been saying this since the last recession. Literally since the bottom of the last recession, there were still fears that there's shadow inventory being held onto by banks. And if you buy now and then 6 months from now, the bank's going to release millions of new homes and prices are going to go down even further. Dion from Dion Talk is a very popular line, and it's very important to understand. It's always a good day to buy a great deal. If you are paying $2,000 a month in rent right now, and you can get a house hack, a duplex, and it's more than what you want to spend, and the interest rate is higher than what you want. And you're paying $2,000 a month right now, and this duplex is going to be $3,500 a month payment. But you can rent out one side for $2,000 a month, and you can get a roommate for $500 a month. Well, your net is that you went from paying $2,000 a month to now paying $1,000 a month. You're making $1,000. 3, 4, 5 years from now, even if the market tanks, if the value comes down, which it could, even if that happens, rental prices, not one time ever since we started keeping track of rental prices have never come down in average, regular, non-high-end luxury markets. In the ultra-rich markets like Manhattan, and I have a whole video on what rents do during a recession. I'll put the link for that in the description below. But excluding the high-end, ultra-rich markets like Las Vegas suites and Manhattan, nationwide for the last 115 years, rental prices, even during multiple recessions, including the Great Recession of 2007 through 2009, rental prices never come down. So if you buy an asset, and that asset goes down in value, unfortunately, right? The worst case scenario, you buy it at 500, 2 years from now it's at 400. If you buy it and it drops in value, so long as you're playing the long game and you can hold it for 5 years, it's most likely going to recover within those 5 years. 2007 was the all-time high. Then 2012, we're kind of starting to increase again. By 2015, we're already peaked back up where we were in 2007. And 10 years after 2007, by 2017, we were already hitting new record highs every month, all the way up until right now. So if you're concerned about buying a property, I understand. I understand the desire to want to buy something when the market comes down. That would be great if you had a crystal ball. I don't. You don't. So all I can tell you is the best advice I have is to understand what will happen if you play the long game. So play the long game. Recognize inflation is not going to help you unless you buy a property. And then guess what? Your asset goes up like everything else. And my $450,000 duplex that I bought in 2018 is now worth $800,000. Why? Crazy housing market and inflation and lots of other factors, but that could be and should be you. Consider making a smart choice and doing what's best for you. If you have questions, leave them down in the comments below. If you disagree with me, tell me in the comments below. Like the video, sub to the channel. I'll talk to you later. Thanks always for watching, and we'll catch you next time.